I just was reminded of this. I'll put the dates on this, but this is something coming up after we'll start in January, 40 days of prayer. Just wanted to mention that to you. We'll put up these posters and get this, Tim printed these up for me, so thanks, Tim. And it's something that's coming up after the first of the year, so I'm looking forward to that already. Everyone have a good week? Went all right? Even though it was a warm one. But, of course, Tony and Diane from Arizona probably thought just about right. Okay. Well, we started a new series last week on the life of Joseph, and looking at it from a little different angle, in the sense that as a story of a family. And as we were looking a little bit of Jacob's family last week, and we'll continue some of that here this morning. But feel free, there's some message notes in your bulletin. If you want to use those, follow along, feel free on that as well. Or maybe as you're taking that out, remind me of a story of a couple. It was an elderly couple. They were getting a little older, and they were sensing that they were becoming a little more forgetful, and so they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, it just happens, you're getting older, and so you just need to write more things down. And so, okay, and they went back home, and they were at home, and the wife says, well, I really would like a bowl of ice cream. And so the husband says, okay, I'll get that for you. And she says, you better write it down. He said, no, I'll remember, you want a bowl of ice cream. And so he gets up, and she says, but I'd want some whipped cream on it too. You better write that down. No, I can remember, you want a bowl of ice cream with some whipped cream on it. She said, yeah, but I also would like a cherry on the top. And you better write that down. And he said, no, I can remember, you want a bowl of ice cream with whipped cream on the top and, a cherry on top. So he goes into the kitchen, and he's there an unusually a long amount of time, about 30 minutes, and then he comes out finally with a plate of bacon and eggs. And he hands it to his wife, and she looks at it for a little bit, and then she looks up at him, and she asks this question, where's the toast? So, that kind of stuff happens. Well, this is, hopefully, there's some good things here today. You won't want to forget these, but I've entitled it, Don't Give Snakes When a Fish is Needed. We read the whole chapter last week. Got going, it was so good, we finished the whole thing. But I want to just remind ourselves, going to read the first 4 verses again of Genesis 37. All right, it says, Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Okay, Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them, of his brothers, to their father. Now Israel, another name for Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. They couldn't say a good word about him. All right, let's pray. Lord, again, thanks for this good morning and this chance to look into your word. And Lord, I thank you for how exciting your word is and how applicable it is today. It's still more practical than anything we read out there. And it's true. It's your word. And so we can bank our lives on it, knowing that you stand behind your word, whereas the opinions of men change pretty much daily, sometimes by the hour. And what they tell us is sure proven, a point the next day or next year is changed. I thank you, your word is not like that. And so help us as we study it to apply it to our hearts and lives. I pray that you might meet us and by your Holy Spirit apply these things to our hearts and lives and minds. For us in your name we pray. Amen. What was your childhood dream? Do you want to be, kids, want to be a fireman, want to be a baseball star. Maybe you want to be, whatever, wealthy, have your own private island somewhere. Now, as long as that island's probably not down in the Keys somewhere. They're going through tough times. But, childhood dreams, they're full of optimism and hope. Anything's possible. And I still think that's a good part about living in America is that, in many ways, you can pursue and achieve it. Perhaps a better life, maybe, a bigger life, whatever. Maybe even president. Although that might be more of a nightmare these days than a dream, perhaps. But childhood dreams, and we've all had them. And back before Al Gore was inventing the internet, I spent several summers, other parts of the year up in International Falls, and I lived there, various times, and known as of course, it was always known as the nation's icebox because that's where the car manufacturers used to. They don't anymore. Used to go up, and park their cars up there on frozen rainy lake and let them sit all winter and come out in the winter and see which batteries, would still be good and which would start the cars. And I guess they don't do that anymore. But we used to, spending time up there, and I can remember one summer. It was a great summer, and it came on a Thursday that year, and it was a great day. But one of the things, living up a rainy lake, it's a large lake. It's a very cold lake, and so it's a great fishing lake. It's not really good for swimming. You can, but we found there's about a 2-week stretch in July that you could swim in Rainy Lake, and it was still very cold, but you could tolerate it. And about a 2-week stretch, and then it'd start, cooling down even more after that. And so we used to swim between 2 docks, and we'd swim, back and forth. But the water's really brown. You can't, it's not good visibility, or at least there, and so you couldn't see anything. And we always knew that there were a number of, snapping turtles in the area. In fact, every once in a while you could see them, you could see their head, floating above the water. And so you'd be swimming, and you just, because you couldn't see anything, you just hoped, that you didn't bump into one of these things. Because I remember one guy did up there, and it took the emergency room doctors, I'm not sure how long time, many hours, to try to get that thing off him because it wouldn't let go. And so anyway, you could swim a little bit there. But we'd dream of, swimming in warmer waters and of having maybe warmer summers and all kinds of dreams. Well, Joseph, as we know, also had his dreams, and we could ask, was God in those dreams? And sometimes it's a little difficult to understand the drama and some of the tension of this story because we know how it ends up. But what if you didn't know how it all ended up? How are things looking as we go through this story and looking at Jacob and Joseph and the story, as a family? How are things looking? And so there, if you're following along on the sheet there, I got point 1. Again, this idea of favoritism, as I read how Israel or Jacob loved Joseph more, and he had 12 kids. Favoritism in a family is a toxic thing, I'll put it that way. Now, there's this one book called The Sibling Effect. The author, Jeffrey Kluger, he writes this. He says, one of the worst kept secrets of family life is that every parent has a preferred son or daughter. I don't know, is that true? Maybe it's true for some. But, he counsels parents, if you do, keep it quiet. But, apparently, too bad Jacob never must have got that memo. Because he did, with 12 kids competing for his attention, as kids do of their father and their mothers, their family, Jacob very unwisely put all his affection, attention on one of the youngest, and that would have been Joseph. As the son of Rachel, the wife that he really loved. Of his 4 wives, Rachel's the one he loved the most, and the other wives knew that. Remember what I said last week? What kind of a family can you build or can you develop, or what kind of a family might it be, when there's polygamy going on, which is never, ever a good thing, and the Bible never approves of it. Bitter rivalries as a result, and all the jealousies that there were. And then look at the hatred, as we know how these brothers were even willing to kill one of their brothers. They hated him that much. They were willing to kill him. And all the unloved kids, uncherished, wives, and then all the other diversities going on in this family. What kind of, what family can you make out of that? Then we'll see, as we saw a little bit last week too, what a messed up family. I think, part we read in Ephesians 6:4, it says, fathers, don't provoke your kids to anger. Well, one of the ways I think we can do that is if we show favorites. As we see in Jacob's case, it provoked anger in his other kids. So that's one of the things, not to show favoritism. And by that, I don't mean, there's a big difference between favoritism and election, where God chooses in his infinite wisdom certain people for certain roles and tasks and so on. And that's different than favoritism, because like I just read in Romans 2, it says God shows no partiality. But anyway, Jacob was, and it was creating problems. And but of as parents, we strive to treat our kids with equal love and attention. That's not always easy to do. Some kids are just easier to love than others. I think of our first son, Dan. He was just so easygoing. He just, everything went so well with him. And we were thinking, man, this parenting thing is so easy. All these other people were complaining about parenting. We go, we don't know what they're complaining about, because everything's just going very well. And then we had the next kid, Laura, and she pretty much rebelled at every suggestion we ever had. And and she would, she was, no car seat could hold her. She was the Houdini of car seats. No matter how tight I strap her in, she would, just matter of time, she'd be standing up in her seat. Ever going down the highway, there she's standing up in her seat. And no bribes, no threats or anything would even just faze her. And of course, I thought, then parenting was hard, and I thought it was just girls, because then our next one, a boy, was very easy to parent again. But, some parent kids, they're all different, they all have their personalities, but of wanting to show them equal love and attention. So, we're not to provoke our kids or grandkids, whatever, to anger. How? Well, one way is by showing favoritism. All right. Jacob did that. That created problems. And we could say this, Jacob came by his tendency to show favoritism very honestly, if you want to say that again, just like he got his name, he earned it honestly, even though his name meant deceiver in one way. Favoritism, because he learned it in the family he grew up in. His mother Rebecca, remember, showed him favoritism over his brother Esau. So he grew up in a family where there was favorites. And so he carried it on with his kids. And that favoritism got him into all kinds of trouble early in his life. You'd think he would have learned. Now, a little more of this context too here in this story. Joseph himself, the son, was pretty good at adding fuel to the fire too, I have to say. He, I mentioned that it talks about, he says in verse 2, he was out pasturing the flock with his brothers, and it comes back and he brings a bad report about his brothers to his dad. He tattled on them. Well, if you had brothers and sisters, if you tattled on one, does that make them love you more? Oh no. We learn usually by hard experience that brother or sister, they're looking for a chance to get even. And so that's what Joseph did. He tattled on his brothers. Well, he's adding fuel to the fire. And then also he was given this coat of many colors. Jacob gives his son this coat, clearly a sign of his favoritism. It's kind of like if you come from a, any family, if let's say your parents bought your brothers and sisters' kids, they bought all their clothes at Walmart, but they bought your clothes at Neiman Marcus, Do you think the other kids wouldn't notice? Do you think they wouldn't care? That's kind of a little bit too what's going on here with him giving him this coat. So you have these things, going on, and that's why I have point 2 on the sheet, clueless in Canaan, where they were living in Canaan, with these types of things, I have to kind of admit, I have to wonder if Jacob, just isn't the, sharpest tool in the shed, if you know what I mean. Why? Well, because besides all this favoritism he's showing and the earlier incidents in the life and the family that he grew up in, there's another piece of the puzzle also that I want to bring out here. And that is, back in 3 chapters earlier, Genesis 34, Jacob has one daughter. Her name was Dinah. And apparently somebody was in the kitchen with Dinah, and she was, I don't want to make light of it, she was raped. And so there's very serious crime. But my point is, where was this crime? Where did it occur? Well, it says it occurred in the town of Shechem. That's important as we go on here with the story. After that occurred in that town of Shechem, he wasn't called the mayor, but he was kind of like the mayor of this town. And after he hears of this, he tries to patch things over with Jacob and his family, and they kind of come up with a plan. And Dinah's brothers and brothers all said they kind of, okay, we'll go along with that plan. They were lying to, they deceived the mayor. Where did they learn that from? But so they appeared to go along with the plan, but then at the right moment, it says Jacob's sons rose up and slaughtered all the men of the city, and took their sheep, took their possessions, and more. So to say that Jacob and his family were not really well liked around Shechem, would be to put it mildly. So now you have come back. So after that incident, now we're back in chapter 37. Where does Jacob now send Joseph to check on his brothers? As it says, he sends them to Shechem. Well, I think, that's where I put this title. I think Jacob was kind of, in a sense, handing a snake to Joseph, instead of a fish. I mean, there's no way that he wasn't probably not going to get bit by this. And to think that he would be sending Joseph into a very dangerous situation, and apparently alone. Why would he do that? And Joseph goes there. He can't find his brothers, so he asks a man that's there, one of the few men that were left, and basically he says, he would be reminding this guy, he's saying, have you seen any of my brothers? The ones that slaughtered all the guys around here, probably some of your relatives, and they're out grazing their sheep somewhere. Probably some of the sheep they stole from you. Do you know where they are? I mean, think of that. Why not just slather Joseph with a bunch of honey and throw him in a den of bears? I mean, very dangerous situation. And it's kind of like Jacob, what were you thinking, sending Joseph there by himself? Well, so a little bit more of this story. I just covered a couple other things there. I want to consider, what can we learn from this, and look into what wisdom can we gain from this at this point here. And so I just put down, I got 3 things on here, and 3 that we can consider. And the first one is, they're all on your sheet there, but inspire others to pursue their own God-given dreams. That's kind of one of the things I get from this. Inspire others to pursue their own God-given dreams. I mean, how often have we seen or heard parents, who are basically trying to get their kids to live the parents' dreams? The parents are still trying to live kind of vicariously through their kids, because the parents didn't get to, and so they're going to try to experience it through their kids. I mean, how easy it is to limit our kids, or even we could do it through our friends, by trying to impose on them our dreams, rather than maybe what God has for them. And so it's very easy to, crush their own dreams. Or we see parents pushing kids in some endeavor or something that really the kid has no passion for or no interest in. The parent does, but the kid doesn't. And so a wise parent will help discover a child's dreams and his interests, and along with giving them some wise guidance then, of course, but not force them to pursue the parents' interests, especially if the kid has no interest in it. And that can be tough at times in different situations, but actually I just think of one thing now. Our son Mike, very good at math. He ended up minoring in math, and so he wanted to become a graphic artist with computers. And so I happened to mention that one day to Lee. And Lee works in that field, computer science, and he's done a lot of hiring of guys and knows what employers are looking for. And I said, what do you think of that? And he said, no, he said, I would not advise him to pursue that. He said, I'd advise him to pursue a degree in computer science. Get a firm foundation, a very broad foundation. And then once you have that, then you can, if he wants, he can specialize in graphic arts. But don't get just graphic arts. There's a lot of graphic artists. Get that firm foundation that will set you up to do all kinds of things. And so I said, boy, that sounds good. You want to tell Mike that because he'll take it better from you because you're the expert in this area. And then that's what Mike did. He got his degree in computer science, for which he's very thankful for now, and so on. So that kind of deal, taking what the kids' interests are and what their where their skills are, and then yet sometimes you need them, you need to steer them a little bit too into making a wise choice. But inspiring them to pursue their own God-given dreams. There's a guy, his name is Jacob Hertz. He was a prominent rabbi, Jewish teacher in Great Britain, and a few years back, and he shared this. He said, when Jacob gave this many-colored robe to Joseph, it would be the same thing as declaring that Joseph would be the next head of this family. That's what one of the things that robe meant. And that, of course, that would go against the whole cultural norms. It was always the oldest boy would become the head of the family. He would get it all, and that was the expectations. That's the way it happened. And so Jacob was undoing that, or not following that cultural lead. I mean, that'd kind of be like, really, it'd be kind of like, let's say, you and say your family, and let's say you got 12 kids, and the older boy, he's expecting he will get it all, and you say, you know what, little Billy, he's going to be the head of this family when I die, and he's going to get the house, he's going to get the inheritance, and the rest of you basically will get whatever scraps might fall off his table. Well, how do you think that's going to go over with all his brothers and sisters? Or the one sister anyway. But that's basically what he was saying by giving them this cult and his favoritism and so on. And, actually, we can admit, Jacob, the dad, had a lot in common with Joseph. Both were dreamers. Both were kind of favorites of the household. Both went against cultural norms because both of them either one of them wasn't the oldest, but they became basically the heads of the house. They had quite a few things in common, and I think both of them probably lacked some in this family and sensitivity issues. They weren't very tactful. And Jacob sent his son into danger by sending him to Shechem to check on his brothers. And the last time he did this, what did Joseph do? He tattled on them. And then he has them wear, this coat of many colors, which basically was kind of rubbing his brothers' noses in the fact that he's his dad's favorites and he's going to be the next head of the family. And, so that's part of this, what's one of the things that led me to say to inspire others, inspire your kids to pursue their own God-given dreams for how God has called them and gifted them and given them skills and desires and so on. All right. A second thing, listen to what's really going on in your family. Listen to what's really going on in your family or in your marriage, even with your friends. We have, for a while there, the door going into our basement was creaking. And so, you go through it and it, would creak. And I thought, oh man, I need to, oil those hinges. And then I'd go on, I'd forget to do so, and because I'd get busy in something else. And then, whenever the next time was, go through that door and it'd creak, oh, I got to oil those hinges. And then, somebody else would go through the door and you'd hear it creak, oh, I got to oil those hinges someday. and in a sense, I think it's kind of like how what a parent has to do, or just anyone can do. You know, let's say you're laying in bed at night, and you think back over your day, and to listen for, you know, what's going on in the family, what's happening, where are the squeaks and creaks in the family or in this marriage? What am I missing? What's not working? What needs to be changed here? What needs to be fixed? So again, whether it be a friendship, whether it be a marriage, whether it be kids, whether, you know, where are the squeaks coming from? You need to listen to what's going on and be aware of what's going on in your family, I think is a very important thing. One of the things that Jacob really wasn't paying attention to what's going on, because bad things were going on. And as a parent, of course, that takes time. You know, it takes, they always talk about quality time, quantity time, and some say, yeah, I don't have a lot of quantity, so I just spend quality time. Well, that's great, but the thing is, you can't program quality time. You never know when it will happen. It just happens. It happens as you're spending time with your kids, and all of a sudden, part of it just is very quality. And so that's why, again, it's when you're with your kids or with that friend or with your spouse where you need to be aware to pick up, and hopefully you'll pick up the hints and the clues. But what's going on in this relationship? It's kind of like checking the family blood pressure. You know, is it high? Is it low? Are you aware? Do you know? We need to know. We should know. So learn to listen to what's going on in your household. And remember, nobody gets it perfectly. You won't catch everything. That's why it takes a lot of communication, takes a lot of prayer. But be aware, though. Don't be selfish. Don't think it's, you know, it's all about me and your comfort, you know, and people think, well, I'm comfortable, so I'm assuming the others must be too. Or sometimes in some families too, there's an elephant in the room. You know, it's that, you know, well, we don't talk about him, you know, or we don't talk about her. I heard this happening again just this past week in a family. We don't talk about him, or we don't talk about that issue. And that's a huge problem. You have to talk about those things at some point. Sometime you do. You maybe not at that moment. That might not be a good moment, but sometime you have to, because especially if you have kids, you can be positive that they're talking about it or they're wondering about it. And they may be wondering all kinds of crazy things about it. And how are they going to know unless you tell them the truth? So to have a healthy family, you need to be aware of what's going on and to be willing to, at the right times, to talk about the things that need to be communicated. Jacob wasn't doing that. And then, well, it kind of goes back to the same thing. You know, if Mama ain't happy, you know, and if the kids ain't happy, you know, Papa, he isn't going to be happy either. He shouldn't be. He's got issues he'll need to deal with. Well, all right. Third thing, remember, kids will generally act their age. You know, as I read earlier in Genesis 37, it said Joseph was 17 years old. You would think that he would be, you know, would be smart enough not to tattle on his brothers. You would think that he would realize it's not smart to always wear that coat of many colors and rub his brothers' noses in it. You would think he'd be smart enough not to go to Shechem alone, you know, where his family was greatly hated, and there probably were many in the area who'd want to kill you. You would think he'd be smart enough not to tell his dreams to his family about how he's going to rule over them someday and then do it again another day. Why did he do it? Well, we see how God used these things, and that's another point too, how even when we make not such wise decisions, God can bring beautiful things out of bad situations. We make decisions, there will be consequences for those decisions, but God is bigger than our decisions, and he can still make something beautiful out of that situation. That's something he specializes in. But still, why did he do it? Well, for one, I think Joseph, he was 17. He was acting like a 17-year-old. You could say Joseph had a bad case of being 17 here in this situation. I've heard that in the South, maybe if some of you are from the South can confirmed this to me, that they have a kind of a saying that goes along that, or they might say in a situation like this. And that is maybe something, hearing about what Joseph did. In the South, they might say, Joseph tattled on his brothers, and his brothers beat the tar out of him. Oh, bless his heart. It's kind of like, it's like, say, sending Jacob or Joseph to ride the New York City subway with $20 bills pinned onto his coat, and sure enough, he got robbed. Oh, bless his heart. What, in the South, I've been told what bless his heart means. What an idiot. It's kind of like saying, Billy Bob wanted to impress his girlfriend, so he, ended up smashing his daddy's car and wrapping it around a telephone post. Oh, bless his heart. And I think, a little bit, Kenny, as I mentioned last week too, sometimes a person may think that they're the only normal one in their family. And if one thinks that, well, bless their hearts. But we're to expect age-appropriate behavior from kids. I expect a 2-year-old to act like a 2-year-old. I don't expect a 2-year-old to act like a 10-year-old. How could they? They can't. No way could they. They don't have the maturity. And the problem comes when you have a 15-year-old who acts like a 4-year-old. That's the problem. But, a 17-year-old only has 17 years of experience. And they will think that's an awful lot of experience, but we know they're just getting started. But let me just add, too, before we get too hard on Joseph here, and we know how it ends up, and he ends up living one of the most, beautiful lives in the Scriptures. But let me add this, so we're not too hard on him. Remember, his mom died just 2 years earlier, when he was 15. His mom died. And the other women certainly weren't going to show him any interest because he was the son of their rival. So they weren't going to help him. And his dad didn't seem to really be the nurturing, encouraging kind. And then a year later, when he was 16, his beloved grandpa, Isaac, dies. So, I'm sure there had to be different emotional things that he was dealing with from that. And in many ways, he kind of was alone to deal with that. Really, how could that's a lot to think of. How could a young boy handle all that? I know people in their 40s and 50s who still can't handle the loss of a parent. So, one great thing about being a Christian is that, we learn. I heard one guy, I read this somewhere, that for every loss, there's an Easter moment waiting to happen. I like that. For every loss, there's an Easter moment waiting to happen. Because with God, there's always hope. There's always help, real help with God. And very often, He will surprise us with what He does, something that we never thought of. We think, like when he had to get across the lake, how's he going to get there? We took off in the boat, the only boat. And here he comes, Jesus walking on the water. Man, I never thought of that. Or we've got 5,000 people. We've got, 2 fish, 5 loaves of bread. There's no way, it's hopeless. No way you're going to feed everybody. And Jesus multiplies it, and we go, man, I never thought of that. He constantly does things like that, and he's still doing things like that. We get in a situation we think it's hopeless. I don't know what to do. I don't know who's going to help me? Well, with God, if our hope is in Him, our faith is in Him, and we, like that great message, faith, hope, and love, those 3 things. We choose those things. We have our faith in God. There is hope. There's always hope with God, no matter the situation. So, again, inspire others to pursue their own God-given dreams. Listen to what's going on in your family, where are the squeaks coming from, what things need oil, and as we expect age-appropriate behavior, ask God to help. Ask God to give you, in this new week, wisdom to make wise decisions, not only in your life, but in your marriage and in your family. All right, we'll stop there.